On behalf of Informa Markets, I'd like to thank you for joining us at the CPhI Festival of Pharma for this India Market Outlook session, sponsored by Lonza Capsugel. Lonza Capsules and Health Ingredient Business is a trusted partner in innovative capsules, dosage form solutions, and health ingredients for pharmaceuticals and health and nutrition companies. Their reputation for capsule expertise and science-backed ingredient has connected 5,000 global customers who ultimately enable hundreds of millions of patients and consumers to live a healthier life. Today's discussion will provide an in-depth look at the Indian market pharma. Dr. Chetan Doshi, Chief Security Officer of USB Private Limited, will be moderating this panel and starting us off today, and it's my pleasure to introduce him. Dr. Doshi has 25 years of professional experience with more than 10 years of experience at leadership position managing generic research and development. Over the years, he has established himself as an expert in driving change and bringing positive change to the culture of the company and its workforce. Dr. Doshi is a senior strategist and technical leader with experience in leveraging technical and business acumen to drive generic products development for regulated and non-regulated markets. He's an expert in portfolio identification, rationalization, product development, and process development using quality by design concept. Now, I'd like to hand out the session to you, Chetan.
Welcome, colleagues and panel members. We have a very interesting session on Indian pharma outlook, and we have four distinguished panelists here: Deepak Sood from Lonza, Dr. Mahesh Bhalgat from Syngene, Dr. Dinesh Dua from Pharmaxil, and Dr. Atish from Mankind Pharma. I'll start with Dr. Dua to give us a brief introduction about himself.
Thank you very much, Chetan. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Dinesh Dua. I have 42 years of long experience in the industry, starting post my MBA from Harvard promoted Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad in 1979. I've had 25 years of pharma experience, starting as a management trainee right up to being the executive director of a large company. Out of the balance, 17 years of experience, it's been in three Ps: Ps Pharmaceuticals, Polymers for Reliance Industries Limited, as well as in paints for about 8 years. So it's been a chemical-oriented and pharmaceutical-oriented career graph. It's been a great journey in the pharmaceuticals, both in vaccines for hooks, bearing works, as we used to call it at that point in time, to APIs, and then to formulations and biotechnology in Walker. I've been involved with Pharmaxil over the last 1 decade, which is Pharmaceutical Export Promotion Council, constituted by Ministry of Commerce, Government of India. I've served as a vice chairman for 2 years, and it's been 3 years now that I've been serving as chairman. It's been humongous to see India evolve as a formulary to the world, or pharmacy to the world, as our Honorable Prime Minister says, supplying value-added formulations at affordable, accessible mode all over the world in 206 out of 215 countries, including US, where we control 40% of the formulation space. So I'm looking forward to contributing and value adding to this conference today on India. There could be nothing more exciting than today's deliberation, and I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dua. May I request Dr. Deepak Sood to introduce himself?
Yeah, thank you, Chetan. So my name is Deepak Sood, and I am representing Lonza here. I have a total experience of about 30 years in the field of healthcare across different countries in the Asia Pacific. I now manage the portfolio for Lonza in India for the capsules and health ingredients, and I am also the managing director for Lonza in India. By education, I am a biochemist. I did my MBA from IMT Institute of Management Technology, Ghaziabad, right? And after that, I had different stints with the companies like Bayer, Denher, Thermo Fisher, and now with Lonza. So my career and my experience is not as illustrious as Dr. Dua's, but I am glad to be in this esteemed panel and looking forward to have a very fruitful interactions here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. Dr. Mahesh Bhalgat, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Chetan. Really appreciate Informa taking the opportunity to bring us all together to talk about a platform that's really, really timely and important, which is the Indian Pharma Outlook. So I'm Dr. Mahesh Bhalgat. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Syngene International. We are a CRO CDMO working with many different sectors of the industry, but primarily, of course, our clientele is the pharmaceutical and the biotechnology industry, and then we also work with some of the other sectors, such as animal health, agriculture, consumer products. My background is in pharmacy. I have a degree in pharmacy. I have my PhD that I finished in the University of Utah in the US, and I stayed in the US for 20 years, working with large biotech companies such as Amgen. Before I decided to move to India and get into vaccine space, working with Biological E, and then heading Sanofi's Hyderabad vaccine manufacturing facility. Um, and of course, now I'm with Syngene based in Bangalore.
Dr. Bhalgat. Atish, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am Mahesh. I am now with Mankind, heading the Mankind specialty business in the Indian market. My total experience is 22 years, and all right through it has been in the sales and marketing space. And I am tremendously interested in people and the power that the digital brings to the farmer space and the propositions that we have with our doctors. And over the period of 22 years, this is what I have tried to drive in my journey in the Indian pharma industry. A management graduate, I joined the industry straight out of college and grew through the ranks. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We all are facing COVID situation or the COVID pandemic, and everyone is very eager to know what is the impact of COVID pandemic on Indian pharmaceutical industry, particularly when it's supplying large portion or large share of pharmaceuticals world over. So this is one of the very important topics that we would like to hear about from our panelists. So I'll start with Deepak. Deepak, how ongoing COVID situation has impacted global pharmaceutical outlook, and what are the challenges and opportunities faced by this pharmaceutical industry?
Thank you, Chetan. So I'm lucky number one. So I think my panelists, they are working for the Indian major organizations. I'm not sure if all of you know what Lonza does. So Lonza, I will give a brief introduction about Lonza. So Lonza is a 6 billion Swiss conglomerate, right, which largely deals with the pharma, bio, and nutrition space. And our second vertical is the specialty ingredients, you know. So in the pharma and the bio space, basically we have the CMO in the services, we do the contract manufacturing, we have the cell and gene therapy services, and in the product space, we do the capsule manufacturing and the health ingredients, for which we have a very big footprint in India. And then we have the bioscience where we supply the research solutions. And in the specialty ingredients, basically we'll supply the microbial control constituents, which have been very, very effective in this fight against the COVID, right? As far as the COVID is concerned, basically, I think you must have read in the news basically about the first vaccine which came into the forefront, you know, which was a vaccine by Moderna, and Moderna has chosen Lonza as one of the CMO partners to manufacture the doses for them. So basically, that is what we are looking at. And in these tough times of COVID, basically, employee safety and the business continuity, like every other panelist here, is one of our key concerns. So what we have seen in the COVID, basically, something like about 188 countries have been very significantly impacted by the COVID, right? India more so, right, due to our huge density of population. And how do we maintain the social distancing, you know? And we are seeing basically the impact which are coming in. Some of the pundits are calling it wave one, extended wave one, or some are calling it wave two. So we are looking at something like about 80,000 cases every day. So it has provided us both opportunities as well as the challenges. Now, looking at the challenges and how they are being converted into opportunities. Now, as we have seen basically, and Dr. Dua has been one of the front runners in a device strategy for India, that is the imports of the APIs. So basically, we have seen that something like about 70% of our APIs have been imported. The same is the scenario with the excipients. We had seen basically a significant piece of our excipients were being imported, largely about the capsules as well. And the COVID situation has provided us with the opportunity basically to show the world our supremacy, right? That how can the Indian manufactured excipients and the APIs can compete in the global space. We have also seen basically in the challenges that how our raw material movement was suppressed, and basically how did we overcome that movement with the mobilization of the CII, with the Indian industry, and with a very, very strong able representation of our esteemed panelists here with the ministry. And the government has also been very, very proactive in giving us the opportunity to drive that. Now, what we have also seen basically that when I was discussing with Chetan in the beginning of our discussions, that we saw the onset of COVID, right? How there was a sort of a very strong disconnect between what the policies were and what was the interpretation by the different officials. For example, we saw that in our own setup, we had one case of COVID, which eventually turned out to be negative, and we identified about 14, 15 close contacts, and all the 14, 15 close contacts were asked to be quarantined. Now, as we have seen, we have evolved from that situation, and now the situations are much more normal. We are identifying the COVID cases. They have been given isolation, and we are not being forced to isolate the rest of us plant members, like what was happening earlier. On the opportunity side, basically, it has given a very strong play for us to showcase our capabilities to the different markets across the world. Our exports have been significantly increasing. Our offerings to the pharma market, where these companies are exporting the products after refilling them, our demand has seen a significant surge. But we also need to have some very stringent policies on the raw material guidelines. In the COVID situation, we have seen a very significant restriction in the movement of materials. So basically, there was a sort of a shortage of the raw material. My raw material is gelatin, and we saw a significant shortage in the raw material of the gelatin because of restriction of the movement of the cathodes and the finished product. So this is something basically what was a major challenge which impacted our industry very significantly. But our global footprint helped us to manage that challenge, right? And we were able to meet up our customers' expectations, our stakeholders' expectations. COVID has also given us an opportunity to have a very, very strong play as far as the or digital marketing is concerned. Indian market, which was supposed to be very, very touch-oriented or very, very FaceTime-oriented market. COVID has really taught us basically an alternate way to do the business, right? People are expecting the web-based applications, the webinars more openly. At the same time, our stakeholders have become much more informed, right? But the demands of the customers have significantly changed, right? How they are looking at the vendor and the manufacturer relation. And it is now getting onto a more knowledge-based partnership rather than purely being a transactional partnership what we used to see in the past, right? These are some of the points from my.
Thank you, Deepak. That's a good segue. You mentioned a lot about unavailability or the difficulty in getting raw materials. I think that's a good segue to get insight from Dr. Dua about how did the Indian API industry or manufacturing industry really was impacted as a result of all of this. Dr. Dua, can you please share your insights on this, and how did Indian industry manage this?
Thank you, Chetan. I think there couldn't be a more contemporary subject than the one we are discussing about, and particularly the API. So I'm going to divide my bit of a presentation into two parts. I'm going to give you a preamble as to where we were, in the 70s, where were we in the 90s, early 2000, and where are we now? It's a very interesting case study, and we've already produced a case in IIM Ahmedabad, my alumni, on the COVID situation, and I'm going to borrow a few kind of instances from there to explain the situation to you. See, first and foremost, in the 70s, when I started my career in Höchst, Sanofi Aventis, rechrist after mergers, serial mergers and acquisitions, everything was being imported into the country. I've been saying this all along on every platform, right? We were beggars on the street because everything was being imported, and multinationals were ruling the roost at that point in time. From there to the Uruguay round of talks, where we did not sign off on the TRIPS agreement as it existed at that point in time, we did not sign off, and thank heavens we didn't sign off. Otherwise, we would have continued in that mode even today. After that, there was a massive collaboration, not intentional, but it happened because the Honorable Prime Minister at that point in time gave a clarion call to make sure that we become self-sufficient in terms of the APIs and formulations and so on and so forth. So the academia and the industry got together and the chemistry evolved. India is an amazing chemistry nation. All of us know that. We've had Nobel laureates from this country in the field of chemistry, physics, and biology, right? So with that amalgam, lo and behold, in about 10 years' time, we became a behemoth in both the verticals, may it be formulations or may it be APIs or even key starting raw materials. Now that journey, got stunted. Whereas on formulations and other verticals, we continued to perform the way we performed and become a pharmacy to the world. When I said that in my introductory remarks, right, and supplying to 206 out of 215 countries. On the API side, until early 2000, actually starting from 1992 to about 2000, we were numero uno. We were number one. We were way ahead of China, both in terms of technology and in terms of dominance of the world. So that being the case, lo and behold, and I was a president with Zydus Cadila Healthcare at that point in time, where what a great instance that I'm going to relate to you is we were making atorvastatin for Eastern Europeans during a different kind of a patent regime because Lipitor was the highest selling drug in the world. We were making the API and intermediates. Now, in came the Chinese suppliers towards 2000 or thereabouts, gave us the samples. Layer by layer, there was a differential analysis of that particular API. I threw the gentleman out and I said, never ever come to my factory. Give it another 3 years, the guys come back, and said that we challenge, we stick our neck out, and we will give it to you at 50% of the cost that you are making. Look at the bravado. 50% of the variable cost, forget about the overheads and things of that nature. And we challenge you on the quality. Our quality is a lot better than yours, and that is a fact. We tested it. In 3 days' time, we realized what they were saying was good. And that is where the Chinese journey started towards dominance of the world in key starting raw materials, in intermediates, and in APIs, right? And in about 5 years, they displaced India from the numero uno position, took the number one position. We slid to number three. Italy and Spain were the other contenders, but they were more towards innovation drugs and less towards generic stuff. So generic space got to be dominated by China, whichever way you look at it. Imagine four key KSMs, key starting raw materials, large scale fermentation, 150,000 liters, 200,000 liters, right? All the roads lead to China. In penicillin G, you have nobody else in the world. The Western European at that point in time and US, who were the innovators of penicillin G, right, just vanished in thin air. All the roads currently, including DSM, which is the largest producer of penicillin G, in China, either through a collaborative route or they've been displaced or they've been shut down. We had 7 plants manufacturing penicillin G. All of them closed down because China was dumping it at amazing prices and the quantity was humongous. Now, that is the backdrop against which I'm going to walk you through this COVID phenomenon as to what happened. Last 10 years, we've been following up with both the political dispositions of the center and the state, saying that we need to be self-sufficient. We need to have a level playing field because what China did was incredible. China, brought in investors and gave them land with a moratorium of 5 years, gave them utility, which in KSMs in particular is about 40 to 50% of the cost. In APS, close to about 20 to 30%. And they gave them free access to industry academia you know, and that was a conscious decision on their part. And another thing, see, in China, it's very clear that they believe in an economic model where they create huge demand for the next 1 decade or two, right? And the supply comes in automatically. In India, we exactly the reverse. We let the demand, split on its seams, and it's only when there's a huge outcry. The supply is created. So two different models of two nations, right? And what they did was they offered these kind of lucrative deals along with 12 to 13% export incentives in pharma parks of the size of 10,000 hectares, 25,000 acres. We are talking about only about 1,000 to 1,600 acres. So look at the size and scale and the economies that they bring in. And the entire facilitation was done by the Chinese government, continues to be done, and we did not do anything for 10 long years. So much so that the domestic pharma industry in India, which has been going at about 10% CAGR last 5 years, right, is vulnerably dependent to the extent of 95% on the Chinese KSMs, intermediates, and APIs. I mean, that's a huge vulnerability, particularly in the perspective of the geopolitical tensions that we're currently undergoing with China, right? And in case of exports, which is another $21 billion, for which I am responsible as a chairman of Amexel, our dependency is on 20%. Why? Because the Chinese are not good at documentation, right? Chinese are not good at facing, highly regulated audits. So they can't compete with us. In formulation, they're next to nothing as compared to us, right? But in APIs, they're way ahead of us. So that being said, it's only during Corona outbreak, starting from, let's say, November in Wuhan city in China down to March when the lockdown got declared. So there was a complete disruption of APIs and the entire domestic industry faced this disruption very acutely. Generally speaking, you tend to keep about 3 months stock for large corporations. For MSME, it's on a day-to-day basis because you have agents, you have warehousing, and you have all kinds of representations of Chinese companies in India, right? So they don't stock anything. They stock only about a couple of weeks, and then it's just on in-time inventory. You pick up the phone, speak to the guy, and he will deliver it to you right away in a couple of days, depending on what the location is. Now that got completely disrupted. In COVID, there was a lockdown, and depending on state to state, the lockdown crippled the operations of the industry in APIs. And that led to a consequent little bit of a shortage and disruption in the formulation space also. This is the time when the government woke up, the industry got its act together again. And hats off to the Secretary DOP, who's just moved on to being the chairperson of TRAI, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. He helped us, Piyush Goyalji, to whom I report, the Honorable Minister for Commerce and Industry, who looks after and is responsible for exports. They got their act together along with DOP, CDS CEO, and along with Minister of Health, Honorable Shri Harshvardhanji, and came to rescue of the industry in facilitating all the issues that we've had. And the distinguished earlier speaker spoke about a disruption of transportation, supply chain management, and differential of understanding of the various notifications issued by Ministry of Health and Ministry of Home Affairs in particular, right? So we got over that. We kind of got back to business in the month of May. April was a complete washout. May and June became sort of stable, and August, September onwards, now things have fallen in place. So to sum it up, API industry today has been the beneficiary of the government listening to us. I personally explained the entire phenomenon of the Indian pharmaceutical industry, particularly API, KSM, and intermediates, to 27 worthy members of parliament in Rajya Sabha, and they appreciated that. So the government has, been under the dynamic leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi ji, and his cabinet, given us a stimulus of $1.5 billion in case of APIs, KSMs, and intermediates, and another 4,000, approx 4,000 crores for the medical devices, where again, the situation is indeed pathetic. We import 95% of medical devices in India, predominantly from the United States, Germany, Netherlands, Taiwan, and China in that order. We are not that vulnerable in terms of dependence on China and medical devices. So with this stimulus as the first phase, I think API industry, although there are a lot of lacunas and issues, but well begun is half done. I mean, something has happened. So therefore, the PLI scheme, the production linked incentive of about $1 billion, and about another 4,000 crores for the pharma parks, 3 pharma parks, and I'm very happy to inform you that there are 11 states, and I'm enjoying it really. There are 11 states competing for 3 pharma parks. I was with the Honorable Principal Secretary and Additional Chief Secretary, Ram Subhag Singh ji of Himachal Pradesh, and believe you me, the intensity with which they're coming forward to compete one against the other augurs very well for the industry. I see Rome was not built in a day. Self-reliance, Atmanirbharta, as the Honorable Prime Minister calls it, and we echo the same sentiment, cannot happen overnight. We've been displaced painstakingly by China with a 20-year effort, right? Humongous effort, incentivization, bringing it all together free of cost, pro bono. And also, even today, by skirting the WTO and TRIPS regulations, they give that 12% through via to sister concerns of various pharmaceuticals units in China. And therefore, in API, they continue to trouble us, irrespective of that. What we can do is as follows. In next 2 years, you will be 40 to 50% self-reliant. I've been assured, even as I speak today, this morning, that if China tries to debase us and tries to dump it like the way they did in 2000 and thereabouts, customs duty would be resorted to, which is 100% WTO compliant. We can go up to 40%, and 40% they cannot debase us. So let's get it clear. 3-4 years, we would be 40 to 50% self-reliant, Atmanirbhar, and in about 5 years' time, we'll be 100% self-reliant. And the sixth year, ladies and gentlemen, we got to give China a run for their money in terms of displacing them in exports wherever we can. So COVID has been an eye opener, a wake up call with the government, all stakeholders, government, industry, facilitators, technologists, academia, getting together. CII, where I head the North India life sciences space as the chairman, right? They've got together, FICCI's gotten together, everybody, PhD Chamber of Commerce, you name it, everybody's together into it. And I'm sure in about 5 years' time, not only will we be self-sufficient and we'll start exporting big time. We continue to export $4 billion worth of exports to highly regulated markets where China cannot compete with us at all, both in terms of documentation, audits, and the other things that I said. But we continue to import $2.68 billion from China. So a time has now come that part should get displaced, and we should contribute more and more to the national exchequer from a current positive contribution of $11 billion to about $30 billion in the next 5 years or thereabouts. So just to wind up and stop here, I would say COVID has been a kind of a blessing in disguise and opportunity, besides being a huge challenge and the biggest pandemic mankind has ever seen, has also been an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dua. That was very insightful, and looking forward to see India as becoming self-reliant for API. We'll now switch to the domestic market, and I'll have Atish have his view on what factors will influence the domestic pharma growth story in years ahead. Atish?
Yeah, it was very nice hearing Dr. Dua, and is kind of comforting, that we are heading towards self-reliance, because the market dynamics are very good for pharma. I think the fundamentals are good, very good. The last 10 years, we have grown at about 11% CAGR. The last 4 years was marginally lower at around 6.5%. Currently, we are growing at about 7.4%. The 6.4 probably happened due to the GST implementation, demonetization, and the price control. And like I said, going ahead, the COVID pandemic has been kind of an interruption, but going ahead, I think we will get back to 2019 growth rates. I believe the industry will grow around 2 to 3% this year in the Indian pharma market, and going ahead, we could see somewhere around 10 to 11%. Now, why do I say this? Now, like I said, the fundamentals are very strong. And number two, COVID has done what all of us in the healthcare space could never achieve. It brought in an awareness about healthcare that was unimaginable. People gave up everything and realized that the number one priority is health. They need to look after their health, and this single biggest awareness is going to be a key growth driver for the farm. Besides that, the fundamentals like the shift in the disease pattern from communicable diseases to non-communicable diseases that is on in India. I think during the COVID lockdown period also, we saw that the chronic therapeutic area was growing faster than the acute therapeutic area, simply because today people realize that you are at a higher risk if you don't manage your chronic diseases. Plus, a country which has 73 million diabetic patients, growing at 3.5% every year. So, and 30% of deaths in India are cardiovascular deaths. So when you have this kind of chronic segment growing, it means people are going to be on drugs for a much longer period, and which is definitely going to drive growth. The demographic drivers, which was there earlier, is there even now. In 2015, we had about 8% of the population, which was elderly. Going forward to 2030, expected that India will have 20% of population will be elderly. A greater salience of geriatric population will only drive growth. Now, I also talked about awareness. Awareness is a key growth driver in pharma because the fact is the first prescription of a doctor is always right? And a patient, if he's aware about the side effects, he probably would go and check a doctor up. Now that we know, what are the symptoms of a diabetic patients because it's a silent disease, people go to the doctor because of the awareness. That has definitely gone up. That's number one. But on the other side, what is also going to drive growth is a low penetration. So a low penetration, which we have seen in terms of doctor to patient, India has 0.74 doctors to per thousand patients. China has around 3.5, US has around 2.9. And this penetration will only grow because at a growth rate of 5% by 23, we should have 1.1 million, which will take us to 0.9. This will also be a key growth driver, right? Plus, this awareness has also brought government interest into the whole game. And we have really seen in the last 5 years, healthcare budgets go up in the government, in the GDP contributions, in the budgetary contributions. It's around $9 billion now. The CAGR is 20%. And it kind of indicates the importance the government associates to healthcare. And with COVID, this will get further accelerated, and a bigger budget will only help us. I think besides this, access is also something which is going to drive the growth of the Indian pharma industry. We are seeing that the number of beds today has drastically gone up. I think COVID was a big scare for the public healthcare system. Was is not a good word because we are still going through it. We'll see a rise in the number of also happening. Plus, the all the Ayushman Bharat, the insurances. See, insurance penetration in India is only 35%. If you look at a neighboring country like Thailand, it is 99%. So this low penetration is going to work for us as we go forward, right? Besides this, technology is also going to be a big play. Whenever we look at the pharma space, and when we look at disease management today, I think there is a shift happening in the doctor. He's looking more at the patient than he's looking at the disease, which means you will see a big play between medicine and technology, right? And integrated end-to-end platforms with bigger visibility and hence better adherence will lead to a greater uptake in pharma. I think all this put together, and the fact that affordability is something which is a key driver in India. And whenever we look at the growth of the pharma industry going forward, we do know that generics will grow faster than the market. We expect a growth of around 14-15% on a year-on-year basis, which should take its salience up to nearly 14%. And even patented drugs, I think that will also drive growth in a big way because personalized medicine is what is the future. When you put all this in a basket and really look at it, you will see multiple growth drivers focused on, of course, diagnosis, focused on treatment, and also on adherence. I think all this put together and the ecosystem, which talks about a greater health awareness, a greater need to be healthy, is going to drive a very good growth in the next 4 or 5 years for pharma. I'm very, very bullish. And with what Dr. Dua just told us, it makes me much more confident. Thank you.
Thank you, Atish. Uh, the contract research and development industry plays a big role in pharmaceutical world. Dr. Bhalgat, you have been on that side of the business. We would like to know what are the changes that CDMO industry has observed since the outbreak of COVID, and what are the challenges faced by the industry?
Um, I think you said it correctly that the CDMO space has been a key contributor in this overall journey. Now, let me just back up before the COVID times, though, just in terms of a perspective on what has been the trend with regards to the CRO and the CDMO space. And there are two things I want to highlight. One is the approach to how research is conducted by the large pharmaceutical companies of the world has been changing, right? We've seen lower and lower amounts of investments in big research centers from the top pharmaceutical companies, but more of a reliance on partnerships, more of a reliance on smaller companies, more of a reliance on institutional, as in university based research that is driving their pipelines now. And this is for a good reason. If we look at the internal rate of return on the pharmaceutical investments in the 1990s, that number was somewhere between 25 to 30%. If you look at it in the last 5 years, that number has come down below 10%. So, needless to say, there was a transition that was required, and which is the other bit of what has changed, right? So, this transition is a move from capex investments to more opex based spending. You therefore have a completely different influence on your capital inflow, and you have a completely different influence on your P&L management. Now, in both of these backdrops, if you start to think about what has COVID done, COVID has actually brought this to even more of a highlight to say, we are not able to rely completely on internal capabilities. A large part of what Syngene, for example, works with is companies that are based in the US and Europe. And where we've seen the crisis hit earlier than it hit India. It's also been where they not all of the companies in the West have been able to come back to their levels of operation to pre-COVID times, versus where in India, uh, thanks to all of the things that Dr. Dua mentioned and some of the other folks mentioned, this being a essential services industry has been supported by the government to actually operate at very high levels of occupancy, which has made it possible for the companies in the West to continue to look at the CRO and the CDMO space in India and leverage that to keep their output and keep their pipelines growing. What has, however, changed is the ability to make some of the decisions because of the uncertain future on the financial picture for the rest of the year. Some of the parent organizations that we work with have had to revisit their decision making, and so that's been one of the components of challenge that has come up. We've also mitigated that by looking at what is it that is needed more locally, and there the opportunity that we've driven that into is leveraging some of our facilities, some of our equipment and our talent to the needs of the local Indian market. By We did repurpose one of our facilities, for example, to make oligonucleotides which could be used as probes and in the manufacturing of RT-PCR kits, just to give an example. The thing that has changed is supply chain paradigms. We used to operate from a just in time for some of our materials to now we've gone to a much more resilient mode of thinking, which has completely brought in a new way of how we manage raw material sourcing. And one of the first things that we started looking at when the crisis was just starting is, what is it that is getting sourced from China and what are some of the alternate sources. This itself drove the opportunity to say that some of these things we may have to start thinking about making those in India. And I think everything that Dr. Dua again mentioned with some of the raw materials that are critical for the pharma industry, the APIs, all of those getting made in India, and the government stepping in to promote that is going to significantly help mitigate that kind of a challenge. The third area that I want to talk about is, and this is specifically true for our industry, is the need to look at our work patterns. we wanted to make sure that this, since we are an industry that actually requires people to come into our labs, into our plants, into our operating areas and actually produce output, what are the things that we can do to maintain social distancing, what are the things that we can do to maintain the components of security and safety at the workplace and keep the productivity levels high. That has therefore driven a completely different uh, approach for us to look at operational excellence, a different approach to working in our different patterns. How do we manage the staff that are actually at home, and how do we bring them the digital platforms to continue their e-learning, improve our awareness around quality standards, improve our awareness around the overall needs of the industry, which then in turn is able to drive both operational excellence as well as business continuity for the future. The last bit that is worth talking about from this is the digitization revolution that has happened, right? The digitization revolution has actually, of course, helped us to use some of these platforms more efficiently for the work from home staff, but it has also brought us into an arena of where we start working with some of the key approval steps, such as the regulatory approvals, and look at how those can be done in a more digitized manner. More, how can we bring speed to those? One, again, as a CDMO industry, we work with many clients with short notice. They are looking for output, they are looking for results, and looking for projects to be initiated without much lag. This has required that we work with the regulatory authorities on saying, this is a need of the hour. How can we get a regulatory approval while we are not actually able to come and present the entire file to you? How do we use digital platforms to make this happen? How do we not deprioritize non-COVID items? Now, some of these have been challenges. The non-COVID items have actually had to take a back seat on occasion, but those things are now changing because the staffing levels at some of these regulatory agencies and some of our clients is going up, bringing us back into a full-fledged partnership model. So while we were internally working with a very high level of occupancy of our staff, we are now also able to get that through the partnership with clients as well as regulators. So, in a nutshell, what I would say is, the change in the need for the pharmaceutical industry to work with more outsourcing partners such as us, both for their contract research as well as their contract development and manufacturing needs, has continued to grow, and has in fact seen the light from a productivity perspective and risk management perspective and business continuity perspective, which is where we feel that this is going to have a long-term benefit for India. Because as we talk about the other transition from India to go from imitation to innovation, drug discovery is not something that India has been doing for all of these years for its own molecules. And when we make that transition, the CROs are going to be at the center of that revolution, because this is where the knowledge resides, because these are the organizations that are doing this work right now, but they're doing it for their client groups who are mostly the Western clients. This is the knowledge that will now also be able to be brought into the Indian environment for making that transition happen. So a bit of things that have been done to make sure we mitigate the challenges that have been coming in due to COVID, and then some of the things that will help shape the future of how we transition the Indian industry through the leveraging of the CROs and the CDMOs.
Thank you, Dr. Bhalgat. I think you touched upon a very important topic about digitization. Uh, we all have seen that, in the current scenario, ha- having employees working from home, digitization plays a big role. Also, the audit aspect that you mentioned, ability of the customer to look at the data that is generated at CRO, CMO industry. So, I would like to get the other panelist members' opinion about how, in their particular area, the digitization has changed. Dr. Dua can also speak about, what is being done in terms of government policies and getting approvals particularly in the Indian context, about the digitization of the information and things like that. So over to Dr. Dua, please. You are mute, Dr. Dua.
Thank you. Thanks, Chetan. Digitization, I think, is the buzzword today. And never ever in the history of humankind has digitization taken so deep inroads as at the time of COVID all across the world. I've witnessed from close quarters my own son who sits in London working for the largest consultancy company, being at home along with his wife on digital platform, and the work is going on as usual. And the amazing part, which is music to my ears the other day, was that they made the highest profits in its history ever through digitization. These are different perspectives. Now, digitization in API industry, that's unheard of. Now, let me walk you through that. In terms of inspection and regulatory landscape, we have trained people so intensely, and Mahesh knows it very well. What kind of effort goes in terms of training people, skilling people, particularly at the shop floor, where you have an issue of speaking in vernacular, showing them how to do it, and then to replicate it, and then measuring, Six Sigma or Kaizen or excellence, as Mahesh referred to a little while ago, to ensure that the productivity increases and skilling is right up there. I'll give you an example. We got this particular offer from a youngster from India who was working with GSK UK through animation to train and skill people. They brought about wonderful animations both on the computer, on the laptop, as well as the mobile enabled app, wherein they would draw out a process in through an animation in your vernacular, any language that you wish to. And India has God knows thousand languages or whatever, right? So they replicated all of that in an animated manner. And lo and behold, in 6 months' time, we saw a transformation of the operational people on the floor who were not as skilled and as literate as we guys are the junior management executives and officers and the above. So this was the impact of digitization just about 6 months ago, when all of this was captured and human to human contact was avoided, and through mobile applications we could up the skills of our personnel to a desired level. I let that go in from Excel to the companies, and everybody is now latching onto it. That's point one. Point two is I've always been saying, and some of the agencies and innovators and large companies have finally agreed to do a desktop analysis for you, audit for you. So we've never ever witnessed that from a remote location in UK or in US, somebody will look through each and every device of your physical facility, your practices, your standard operating procedures, and the whole abracadabra of the auditing on a desktop in about 2 days' time. It's happened, and we got the approval, we got the observations, we are preparing the CAPA, and everything's going to go through. So this is the beginning of great times for the entire industry, and I'm sure it's going to happen in other industries as well. But since pharma is highly regulated, I think the role that digitization has played. I mean, 50% of our personnel are working from home, and I've seen it, and I'm myself a beneficiary of that. I tend to work 18 hours a day, working from home on a digital platform, as compared to about 12, 14 hours that I used to. So that's the amount of productivity increase. Look at RPG. RPG, Harsh Goenka has gone ahead and very clearly stated to the world, hey guys, I've arrived. I'm going to save 400 crores of my real estate. I'm going to save productivity. I'm going to avoid 4 hours of back and forth travel and so on and so forth. Other advantages by making everybody except the production floor in a measured manner and the security staff, right, operating physically. The rest of them, for all times to come, are going to work from you log in, everybody knows what time have you logged in. You log out, everybody knows for how long have you gone for lunch. So they monitor you more closely than ever before, and the work goes on. So, in my considered opinion, in view of the time constraint, I would say digitization is a virtue. It is now deeply us, and for all times to come, it's going to be there to stay. And the productivity, cost optimization, and whole host of other measures all over the world. You're so beautifully connected. Who ever thought so that we would be doing this bit of a CEO's conclave over the VC, we were looking forward to a CPhI grand stand, and out there in such a beautiful chamber, 20 of us will sit there and debate. So it's amazing what's happening, and I welcome this digitization move. And if you have money, guys, put it into healthcare, into IT, because IT is going places.
Thank you, Dr. Dua. Deepak, your views on digitization, digital world?
Yeah, so basically, I would divide it into two parts. So basically, the first one is from the customer end. We just had our first digital audit of our site by Lupin. So this was one of the first ones what we had in our history. And if somebody was talking to me about 6 months back, I would have said that, are you out of your mind? That audits and that to digital. And in such a heavily regulated world, right, a digital audit happening, and that too for the products which are getting supplied to the regulated markets. Now, COVID has made it possible, right? I think this is one of the side effects I would call of COVID. We have just installed one of the capsule manufacturing machines in our site. That is one of the highest throughput machines, and that produces something like about 5 million capsules a day, capacity of approximately 2 billion capsules a year. So this is the machine basically which is the first in India that has been running in our US site, right? And a very big paraphernalia of different components, and that has been done digitally, right? Earlier, we used to plan that there would be a team of about 20 engineers which would be traveling to us from US, from Europe to do this type of installation. And this entire thing went very, very seamless, and that too digitally, right? Nobody could have thought about it. Right, on the sales front, basically, the customers have become more demanding, right? They are much more informed. The webinars, I think all of us would know the name of the game, right? We have the virtual workforce, but we will also see basically that the companies have realized that the demand has not been impacted by not having a significant amount of face time with the customers. So you would see virtual workforce being one of the trends basically in the coming years. The companies would be investing more in the back office workforce, which would be more like the inside sales, the pricing, the business analytics, etc., etc. Right. One of the lopsides I found of the digitization is that how can we make it more attractive? How can we make it less redundant for the people? We have seen many, it started with a big bang when people were given the option of working from home. Everybody was so excited. But now you talk to the same people, right? They say that, okay, we are tired, right? Our working hours have no endpoint. If we were working for 12 hours a day, we are now working 18 hours a day. And Dr. Dua just mentioned in his speech, that he's himself working about 18 hours a day. So my day, I interact with my Japan team at about 6 o'clock in the morning because it is 9:30 for them, and then I end my day at about 9 when I interact with my US team. Right, so you can see basically all of us are practically working for 18 to 20 hours a day. So what type of a toll is it going to have on us on the longer term? Right? Are we heading for a burnout? That is something what all of us as the business managers we need to be conscious of. It is all starting with a very strong excitement. People are thinking that they would have more time to their family, but we have seen in the recent reports, it has also resulted in more amount of domestic violence. The executives are feeling more wore out, right? How can we make it more friendly, right? More oriented towards employee. How can they keep the balance? Because most of us are now working in the isolations, right? And that is never a good sign, right? While it has its own very significant advantages, we have to be conscious of the fact that it can have very significant side effects.
Okay. Thank you, Deepak. Atish, what are your views? How is digitization going to impact market and the demands in the Indian pharma industry?
I
Interaction with
think,
doctors, etc.
yeah, I think there was always a promise of digital. Then we talked about going digital, and then this small virus comes along, and we have gone digital completely. Uh, I heard what my co-panelists just spoke about, and I think we are no different. But the kind of things we have just lived through, was perhaps unimaginable in January and November. Imagine we have the highest field force in the country. Our field force is nearly 12,000. And if someone were to tell me in January, that they're going to be at home for 2 months or 2.5 months, it would have really, really shocked me. But then digital is such an enabler, and the power has just been unleashed now, right? And I also feel that digital, we all know, is what is helping us navigate this crisis that we are going through. But what is very important to understand, there are certain underlying trends which was already there in the market for quite some time. The number one is your customer was changing. I mean, all of us, whatever we do, whether it's API or whether it is CDM, whatever we do is for that one single person, the patient, and his interaction with his doctor. We say the doctor is our customer, and we have seen multiple changes happening over there, driven by digital in many ways. So the first thing, is how medicine is prescribed, has changed. More importantly, how medicine is practiced has changed. So when this COVID thing happened, when the lockdown happened, the government of India came up with e-teleconsultation, right? So, historically, we have always known that the doctor needs to feel the patient, feel his pulse, and then do his treatment. But there is a new kind of capability now required. But I really believe it was very, very proactive on the government's part to move so quickly and bring in teleconsultation guidelines. And going forward, we see that the data labs story tells us, the data tells us that it will hit a CAGR of 48% till 2025 and could be about $0.7 billion market in India itself. But more than that, from a sales and marketing perspective, it kind of tells you that how much has your customer, how much has he needed to change to adjust to this new normal, right? And how medicine is prescribed. I think that has also changed, simply because today doctors look at, like I said earlier, look at managing the patient, perhaps give it an equivalent treatment as much as that they treat the disease. And the need to have continuous monitoring of the patient is something that is evolving today. And here again, digital will play a huge, huge part. Going ahead, I believe home technology, home diagnostics will be a key growth driver, right? And it will really influence how doctors prescribe. So that's another thing, we see a lot of changes happening over there. Then how medicine is delivered. We have seen huge changes in this front. Online pharmacies, which had a very low penetration earlier, going forward, looks like in the next 5 years would be a $4.7 billion industry in India itself. Though there are, and with the entry of newer players, the government entering into this segment, I think that this will be another huge change. Digital will facilitate as we go along, right? Also, if you look at how your patients are behaving because of this crisis, and this change was always there. I kind of feel it has got accelerated with the COVID crisis. I think patients today are much more outcome driven, right? And that is also changing the way the doctors look at the patients and how they practice. We are in an era of evidence based medicine, and patient expectation is that of price, is that of convenience, and like I said, outcome. And here digital will play a big part, because the patient himself, is informed. And talked about this piece earlier. The fact that technology is growing in India. See, we had in 2019 we had 6.3 million smartphone users. Could go up to 1 billion by the next 5 years. And connectivity is really going up. And about 93% of people go online to know about their disease, about their health. So you see a much more informed patient today. All this, will drive great transformation, all facilitated by digital. Plus, when your customer changes like this, your sales and marketing proposition also changes. So at one side, e-consultation came big time. We saw online coming in. Remote working also came in, which I think all of my colleagues talked about, and it called for different capabilities. See, in the branded generic space, when you go and promote to the customer, you talk about your brands, right? But if you don't get to meet the customer and you have to do it remotely, it requires a different set of skills. And I think digital again will be a big facilitator here. And the fact that a new set of skills is required will require newer capabilities. And e-learning, learning online will be another big play in this space. So to sum it up, I completely agree and believe that digital has completely transformed the way we do our business and the way our customers do their business, and what patients expect from all of us. So going forward, you will see much bigger integration of digital and its parts like AI, machine learning, IoT. We will see a much bigger play in the Indian pharma market. Thank you.
Really about e-lab notebook, e-BMR, which will facilitate more of digital or distant regulatory audits, etc. Do you foresee as a customer, as a uh, contract research organization, your customers demanding such kind of tools to be implemented within pharmaceutical industry?
Yeah, so I think there's actually the whole digital can be a conversation in itself, especially in the CRO and CDMO
Right.
world. I think you hit on the big thing where customers are now, of course, expecting that because everything that is being done is digitally captured, including conversations, including meetings such as these webinars. They're of course expecting two things in a very clear and dramatic way. One is the speed of response, because now everything is already online and therefore it's just a matter of transferring, moving things around. Second is a lot better trails, right? And this for us all in the pharma industry, we are all familiar with requirements such as the Part 11 requirements, where the audits become very important of all the data that has been generated, how it has been managed, how it has been captured, and now this is directly immediately visible, available to our customers, giving them two things. One is a opportunity to make decisions rather rapidly. Second is also build comfort in the progress that has been made. So I think the whole customer interaction, because of digitization, has really changed for us and is continuing to make leaps and bounds kind of changes that we will continue to see. And I think this is going to be very useful for the overall transition towards even more digitization that is getting embedded through concepts that we've already been talking about: laboratory 4.0, manufacturing 4.0, EBMR, LMS, so on and so forth. Then there's the other component of the interaction with the auditors, which is where we've actually conducted 8 virtual audits so far. We have now started investing more and more in infrastructure that will make those kinds of audits virtually possible, with the highest degree of confidence and comfort for both the regulators or the customers who want to do audits with us remotely, realizing that this is something that is going to be here to stay. I won't dwell on another topic. So this was more about client and partner interactions. There's another topic which is about what have we done within our campuses for operational excellence, e-learning, and so on and so forth. Since that has been covered by many of the other folks on the panel, there's one other component of digitization that I will just add, which is the fact that we are now learning even more to use this data in a much more effective way. And I want to give an example of that, right? So data analytics, which is the possibility that is there, is possible both for just implementing shop floor changes. For example, it's possible to now say how much time is being spent on training much more accurately versus execution, how much time is being spent on an equipment, because now your everything that you're doing on your equipment is getting uploaded right away, immediately, in real time, and then gets analyzed. So there is the whole operational excellence part of it that comes in. Then there is the scientific benefits of this whole data revolution that come in. And for example, I just want to offer, we are getting into programs of talking about how do we use e-learnings and AI based methodology to do antibody humanization, so that we can look for specific sequences, specific segments that actually need to be modified to bring about much better antibody humanization. We're doing that for stability profile prediction. We are using all of the modeling and all of the data for doing that. We're using modeling to predict things like IC50, so that you can be much better at your molecule selection early on. And I think this, without going into many more such specific examples, this aspect of leveraging data is something that we should not miss out in this whole build and transformation that we have going on around us. I believe in India we are specifically much more better poised to leverage this, because this needs working of the as what I call as the IT and the BT sectors together, right? So information technology working with biotech, working with the pharmas, and making this revolution much more beneficial part of our transition is actually going to play a very, very important role. So I'll stop there with regards to those three specific areas of where I think digitization is making an impact.
Thank you, Dr. Bhalgat. You know, as we come towards the end of the session, I would like each panelist to talk about what are key success factors for pharmaceutical industry in India. Deepak, can you give in brief, how can India become a hub for innovation for global pharmaceutical industry?
Thank you, Chetan. So basically, I would be very, very brief here. So basically, in all our pitches, when we are talking about the Indian pharma market, we are looking at China. Especially for the optimized manufacturing. Now, I have a plant in China, and I see that very, very closely. Some of the challenges we face and we need to overcome. That every time we talk about the new pharma parks, but what about the harmony between the existing pharma parks? It's very difficult for me to wind up my operations from my existing park, and since another park is offering me some incentives, I can go there. So we need to have a more harmonized policy basically towards this, so that the incentives to the current investors are not reduced, and they get at par playing field, so that they can compete more effectively. The second thing is, you see, if you look at our manufacturing, the manufacturing is broadly divided into three parts, raw materials, utilities, and manpower. Right? If you look at China, basically, the government spends and invests a lot in the utilities. Just to give you a very brief example, I need to run steam basically for my manufacturing operations. Now, if I go to my China side, the government has provided the steam to all the steam line goes through all the industrial parks. Whereas if I look at my existing facility here in Daruhera, I have to generate my own steam. Now, in the times of COVID, when I require the biofuel, the movement of the goods is significantly restricted, right? And that impacts my productivity, that impacts my cost, and that impacts my total operations. So how do I bring those facilities in the utilities to the factories, to the manufacturing establishments? That is one thing which we need to see further. The final thing, basically, whenever we look at India, basically, we are talking about the cost as one of the major value propositions. Now, what I have seen in my experience, that as long as you have only cost as a value proposition, right, the system cannot sustain for a very long time. Because if you have to have the quality scientists, if you have to have the current worldwide equipments which are being used, you have to make investments, right? So the value proposition has to go beyond the cost, right? And we have to bring up parity between the quality and the price, which is right now looking lopsided, right? We don't use the current technologies. We have a huge amount of innovations. So as one of my co-panelists said, that how do we bring the shift from the imitation to the innovation, right? We have to move the cost as the only value proposition, right? We are there, right? But we still have a way to go, right? And I think with the vision of the government of India and a very active esteemed panelist here, right? I think we can bring India to the level basically where we are truly the world lab for the vaccines and the pharma. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you. Thank you, Deepak. Atish, you have mentioned several key drivers in your earlier talk, but can you briefly touch on, do you want to add any other domestic uh, drivers for the domestic pharmaceutical industry?
So, I think affordable pricing is going to be a perennial story in India with the kind of scale that we have. So, it's important that any company which can price and make their drugs affordable, that will be a critical success factor. That's number one. And if you look at the government is also concentrating today on low prices, right? But the next play, I think, is going to be on quality. So any organization marketing in India needs to really, really focus on the quality of the drugs that they bring into the market. The third thing is associating with the patient in the patient journey. Getting to disease management. I think I've been talking about this because you move from prevalence to diagnosis to treatment to really care, or adherence. I think it is in this whole journey the adherence big gap area, especially with the rise of chronic diseases. So companies which can focus on this area will definitely find success. Besides this, a capable field force in India has always been important because doctor engagement, scientific doctor engagement, is best achieved with an inspired field force. And how you play the digital. It's a digital world. How do you mix these two will also be a critical success factor. So this four basically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Atish. Dr. Bhalgat, three bullet points for role Indian CDMO industry can play for the success of Indian pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, I'll just make it very, very brief. I think what we need is, actually, I'll make it four. One is from the government perspective, we need not just incentives, but we need guarantees as well. And I think that will really put a thrust on making in India and leveraging India. On the regulatory side, reliability and transparency, I think that's very important for our customers to continue to come to India for growth of this particular industry, the CRO CDMO space. Academic, I think we need a lot more partnering for talent development. And lastly, specifically on CRO CDMO, a problem shared is a problem solved. We need to leverage the space for its knowledge, capacity, and capability to bring innovation and move from imitation to innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhalgat. Dr. Dua, lastly, what should be the policy and structural changes to foster innovation, generic drugs, biotech, CDMO, and excipient industries in India?
Thank
It's
you. Shall be very brief to the extent possible. First and foremost, to answer your questions on all the verticals that you mentioned, generics, biotech, CDMO, and excipient industry, they have to fire in consonance with each other. You can't sacrifice one at the cost of another. Number two, innovation. Please unshackle. We've taken tremendous initiatives in asking the government, thanks to Dr. Vakela, and they have now constituted an industry, nerve center with the promoters being part of that to make sure that unbelievably only in India you have 14 hurdles to clear to start any R&D. That's rubbish. That has to be done away with. The government has told us it's going to happen. Two is that a stimulus is going to be given very shortly for innovation R&D. Point two, generic drugs. Come to specialty drugs. We've had enough of Me Too. Get into 505 Me Too, right? India deserves it. India wants it. Doing it for US. Why not for India? New drug delivery, very important. Otherwise, your growth is going to stop. Thirdly, biotech, top 10 drugs, $60 billion. That's the space to be in. There are only about 7 organizations in India as compared to 20,000 formulators who are into bio, not otherwise. It has got to spread like formulations. Otherwise, you're going to miss the bus. The top 10 drugs in the world today are biotechnology drugs, monoclonal antibodies, and so many others, cancer in particular. CDDMO, what else can I say than what Mahesh said? He summarized it so beautifully that they've been, looking externally. Now they have to look internally. There's so much happening in India that, organizations like Syngene, very proud of them indeed, right, also need to contribute to India. The government of India, Department of Pharmaceuticals, and others need to spare a thought, make it easy for them to operate. I mean, I'm witness to the fact that things are lying unattended in the name of COVID for 6 months. And I'm personally spearheading this campaign along with Dr. Sumani, to make sure that we expedite. lastly, and most importantly, excipients. Good news for you, Deepak. I must tell you, I don't know whether you're aware or not. We have pitched for giving a PLI, production linked incentive, and other opening up of whatever problems you stated for the excipient industry as well. So with all of these verticals, operating at an excellent pace and in consonance with one another, would see India pharma vision of the current $42 billion going up to $130 billion in 5 years. Otherwise, if we focus on one, leave the other one, we're going to miss the bus. With this, I'll just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dua. Uh, with this, I'll end the session. I thank all the panelists for the wonderful discussion, and I also thank Informatics for providing me an opportunity to moderate the session. With this, I'll hand over to Diana.
Thank you, Chitam, for moderating this great session, and thank you to all the panelists for such a comprehensive market outlook. We really appreciate you joining us today. So I think with this, we conclude today's session. Thanks again to all the panelists for taking part, to our sponsor, Lonza Capsugel, for the support, and to you, our audience, for your attention.